Good afternoon, I'm Woody Evans. I run Presales at Delphix by Perforce. And apologies for Ilker, who was unable to make it today. I'm joined on stage by Marivi Stuchinsky. So you've played a leadership role in infrastructure and software for several companies, and you currently are the VP of Software Engineering at Experian. Mm-hmm. You've got a broad background in property and casualty, in healthcare and entertainment, financial services, and in your most recent role, you lead teams in Malaysia, Bulgaria, and
India, Hyderabad.
Covering 24 different countries, if I'm not mistaken. So it's great to have you here and a chance to connect and talk about some insights that you have about DevOps and compliance.
Thank you.
So first, you've got a wide variety of tools in use. How do you implement security and compliance solutions in your DevOps pipelines?
So as Maro said, I learned this. My background originally is infrastructure. I was a network engineer. But 10 years ago, I switched. I went to consulting and I learned application development. Actually, that left shift or shift left is for compliance in application and software, you have to really have all the security controls even before going into production. So I think that's where Delphix plays a good role on that because, as you know, masking and even I would say database virtualization, you can save a lot of money because we have loads and loads of consumer data. So I think that would be very good use case for Delphix to come into Experian is, left shifting, getting snapshots, doing that, and putting your security controls through your CI/CD pipeline, even in the dev environment, then move into production. So all the controls are there, and the vulnerabilities are, hopefully minimized. There's still vulnerability check, but that's how we do it. Of course, the infrastructure is different, but I think we can talk about that. But from an application perspective, what I do now is a lot of, shift left.
Okay.
And
It seems like there's a lot of these compliance mandates and they're multiplying pretty rapidly. And as you said, you've got 24 different countries that you have to handle. How do you manage so many different requirements, how they come up and how you manage them across all those countries?
Yeah, so we do have a global security framework. It's called EGSO. There is a framework that is mandated by the global team, but then we have also localization. Because as you know, once you go to EMEA or you go to Brazil, GDPR is different than LGBT. India has its own compliance measure, China has. But then the global security framework is still there, but each team, that's why we have a team in Kuala Lumpur that takes care of Asia Pac, and then for compliance measure there, and also in Hyderabad they take care of that. India alone has many different compliance measure. I forgot to tell you, I do have a team in Monaco, which is actually pretty good to be visiting them. But they also help with localization there because, as you know, even within EMEA, the French has more rigor on their compliance. As far as we are cloud, mostly cloud-based, and so availability zones are important because data cannot leave a particular AZ. So even from my networking background, I would also know that make sure all those VPCs are set up correctly.
That's interesting. So data has to cross a boundary. So do you focus on the most specific country with the most comprehensive rule set, or is that really the localization thing that really comes forward?
It's the localization. So it's a hybrid, right? So you have sort of that framework that everyone follows from an Experian perspective, but the localization is the one that
That's
really takes the key.
I know that our South American friends call it tropicalization. That's their phrase for it.
Yeah.
So you're one of those unique execs that have had a leadership role in lots of different industries that have a different take on security. You've been in healthcare, you've been in media, you've been in lots of different places. How how has your compliance posture changed as you move through those, and where is it the same or different, and why?
I'd say I actually first met Jed when I was at Sony, and that's more. We were using Delphix more because we have petabytes and petabytes of data because of a lot of the video content and that. I'd say in media and entertainment, it's not as much strict until the Sony breach happened, but I wasn't there anymore. But I think the most regulated that I've seen is healthcare, right? So how did I change that? In healthcare, I was infrastructure. So of course, that's different because you have not just your firewall and all your intrusion detection and all that, but it's the HIPAA compliance as well that you have to take care of. Financial institution has different regulatory besides the regional regulatory. You have FCRA. So you have to kind of step through that. That's why even localization is very important. And not only that, we always, forgot to tell you, the one we protect most besides localization of the country is the country that produce revenue. So, because of course, if something happens there with regulatory,
so
then
are
you're
you
shut
saying
down.
that a corporate leader who's thinking like a strategist, that the most important thing may not be the regulation per se, but rather which data is the most valuable?
Yep.
That's the one you should focus on. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, from our perspective, let's say we have what we call strategic clients like Lloyd's Bank or Santander, American Express. If something happens, and we provide the application tooling for their data scientists and also their model development and scores, if something happens in those clients, then your branding is done. That's why they have a special sort of check every time that we do a QBR with those clients.
That's interesting. So there's both country-specific and customer-specific kinds of things that you think about as a strategist. That's interesting. I haven't heard that before. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. How do you see infrastructure as code and data as code evolving? And specifically, what compliance measures do you think are inherent to those? And how does automation and compliance fit in with those ideas?
So I think whether it's infrastructure as code or data as code, is automation is the common thing. But if you are not careful with automation, or if you're not validating and testing that automation, regardless if it's data, really infrastructure as code, I feel I grew up in infrastructure, so it was easier for me. But again, in the data side, it's not only securing the data, it's where's the data going, right? So that's the hard part, and that's where a lot of that's why I said it's inherent, because infrastructure as code, that's where you actually do your virtual private cloud, your configuration, and if you're not careful with that, then it affects data. So.
All right. Now it's time for our thinker question. So your data analytics teams provide features and models to credit bureaus and all sorts of people who make very big decisions about lots of people's lives.
Yep.
With the advent of responsible AI, what initiatives are you planning to make sure that your models are fair, ethical, secure, transparent, and accountable?
Yeah, so Experian is big in AI, and we actually have what we call our own Experian GPT. So we're probably the first one that bought tons of GPUs from NVIDIA. So we can segregate that and not go out of our network boundaries, so that, because our data cannot go out, because otherwise I think demographics, we always have those rules. So we make sure, we make sure we don't discriminate on where. Actually, in Europe, you can use geolocation, but some countries, and the demographics, but in some countries you can't. So our sort of AI models and our features, or what we call attributes, for each of those countries have that as part of the feature.
That's great. And I know we talked a little bit about how you're exploring something called retrieval augmented generation.
Yep.
And that model you talked about, there's a name for it. What did you call it? Called it Experience?
Oh, Experian GPT. Our code name is called Crocker. You know, Betty Crocker.
Ah, wow.
That's what we call our AI, internal AI.
Well, what do you see as the future of that? And what do you think data platforms can offer to help you with that future?
Yep. So in Experian, you have what you call full population of your consumer. Every consumer, let's say for like big financial institution, is a different demographic, different type of consumer. But if you go to like subprime lender, that's a different demographic. So the models for that type of consumer is different than your strategic clients, right? My division is mostly we're B2B, so we don't have a direct to consumer. You probably would see in your iPhone, you can download Experian Boost and you could see what your credit rating looks like. That's a different division. So we actually, for RAG, we have, we used Llama as our base, but we actually have this different, we call it Crew AI. You can Google it, it's pretty effective. So our engineers developed these different Crew AI, and it goes to the different population of our raw data. And with that, we don't need to really code the attributes anymore. We code based on the population. So our data scientists have a lot of the raw data, and they say, how can I give a financial institution the number of consumers that have collections, or the number of consumers who's got bankruptcy? It's in plain language, because what we do is a Crew AI goes to those raw data.
Wow, so you were running NLP directly on that.
And this is why I was telling Travis, some of our business use case is we need synthetic data. Because the payload of the data that we analyze is too big.
Wow.
And so if we're doing experimentation as a data scientist, we could do experimentation on a subset of data, but it needs to be the different distribution of that population. So the Crew AI can say, this is the best attributes or features, so you can score that consumer.
Interesting.
So.
Well, we do have a few minutes for some questions. If anybody in the audience has some questions, I have a couple others in case you don't, but I'll open it up to anybody who would like to ask a question. I know Travis indicated he had a question.
I'll just ask her.
Okay, anyone? Yes?
I guess, how big...
The mic is coming for you.
Oh, this is a great session. Thank you. How big are your teams to do this? And then I'd love to learn just a little bit more about how you got started with that AI initiative.
So I report to the global CTO, and our division is called Experian Software Solution, and so we actually are the software services that develops for all of Experian, right? So he's got 1,200 engineers globally. My team for specific analytics, I have about 350 of it. And that's across the different development center.
Thank you. And then how did you get started with your AI?
Oh, the AI, how we got started.
How long ago did you start your own chat and stuff?
So I have a little trick on that. When I was at Sony, do you know that the first AI was actually done? Anyone watch Jeopardy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, behind Jeopardy is Watson. And when I was at Sony, I was the network, and I managed network and server engineering. We're the one who installed Watson. So that's truly the first AI. That's how I got started. All those questions are done by Watson. In Experian, we got started because our first use case used to be we would code features or attributes in C or in R or in another PySpark language. But then when it goes to the production environment, we have different type of platform. Let's say if you're using Databricks, it's not going to take C. So we were doing code conversion of all these attributes. And we had an idea says, why do we have to have a programming language to create filters and attributes? Why can't we just look at this population? And that's when I said, okay, let's do not code. That's why it's really NLP is where we started. Because we have a productivity metrics that we need to meet, mandated by our CEO, that we have to reduce by 20% by using AI year to year.
That's super interesting because I was at a conference a little while back, and the number one response of the CIOs was they all know they have to invest in AI, that they don't know the ROI.
They don't. So if you look at the total cost of ownership, there is upfront loading of investment. Like I said, you have to have a lot of or Amazon needs to supply all your EKS, all your compute, all your storage to have AI to work, because you need that. But in the long run, resources, when you look at the number of developers that used to, or the data scientists, and then time they code, a model, it's a lot. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have another question? In the front, sir.
The question with respect to the quality of AI result. Did you measure any deviation or divergence with respect to R or C programs that are, let's say, not generative, so they are exact? So did you measure any deviation?
We do measure. For models, we measure what we call Gini. So if we have a feature that we say we have generic features, right? Are you 30, 60, 90-day delinquent? Those are the generic features. Are you, when did you last open? How many trades do you have for per consumer? So we do still validate and spot check what the AI take. And RAG actually helps because that's a continuous reiteration. Another thing is what we have to train the analytics folks is prompt engineering is really the key. Because if you say to Crew AI, this is what I want, and you're asking not the right question, it's gonna go back with garbage. So. Yeah, we do measure. We have spot check. We have, actually approval flow, especially for strat clients, before the scores goes out. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
And do you check your models for drift as well?
Yes, we do, and we have lineage as well and drift monitoring.
Amazing. Yep. We have time for one more question. Anyone?
Sure.
Hi. You mentioned earlier that you really focus on some of the revenue generating regions and ensuring that they're protected. Do you find that those regions have stricter compliance requirements in place?
Not necessarily. I mean, we have Australia, New Zealand is a combined region, and they're big. We just did an acquisition there. But if you look at their compliance, all compliance, they would say it's strict, but it's interpretation. But Australia does not really, or New Zealand, both, does not really as strict as a compliance as the UK. But we have big clients in Australia, so yeah. North America, actually, except for the CCPA and all that. It's pretty. It's actually easier compared to Europe. Europe has the more strict,
gold standard.
the gold, and data can't pass this availability zone. It's really hard. So you have good market there for Delphix with your EMEA.
Well, Marivi, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. No time for singing? I heard you
No
sing.
time for singing.